upon himself or took the nation's assets and enriched himself when the entire nation is benefiting from a land policy? And what is wrong with the president getting a slightly bigger land?
An acre?
Okay. All right. Now let me allow Mr. Duncan to complete his intervention. I had said that we wanted to give Mr. Ogle an opportunity.
I should mention there are other Guyanese who got double house lots.
Yeah.
At $58,000 for $1 million actually.
Yeah. To allow Mr. Ogle to make an intervention, and then we will allow Mr.
If I may,
Nandalall.
sir, I haven't completed.
Yes.
Because the point I was getting at is to get clarity, merely to say that, but to make the point that it is not the president alone who has purchased that land, but the land was on sale for any person who wanted to purchase. And therefore, yes,
including a former regional chairman.
I was about to say that, including a former regional chairman of Region 10, who had also made a purchase, but unfortunately, the check bounced.
But can I ask, I don't speak for APNU or the PNC, can I ask Mr. Duncan, where was this land advertised? When did they advertise oceanfront land going at $5 million an acre? Because it must have escaped me, and a lot of other businessmen.
No, it must have escaped you because the regional chairman of Region 10, he knew, and he purchased.
No, I don't understand this argument.
The issue shifted.
Chairman knew, because it had to be advertised
into house.
That is what I wanted.
All right, let me see what happened. The AFC and APNU, APNU, realized that they were completely weak grounds. If you look at the resolution they tabled in Parliament, nothing was about land. Nothing was about what the president owned, what he didn't own when he came into Parliament. It was about his pension and benefits. And after they recognized that they couldn't move to touch his pension and benefits, they're shifting the goalposts to talk about corruption in the way he acquired things. Well, I'm telling Mr. Hughes and those in the opposition, you can examine. Let us all who are in the public domain tender our assets and liabilities under the Integrity Commission Act. And let us have independent auditors perusing and analyzing the statements which we have submitted. And then we will see who will be found wanting.
All right. But really, I have to object to this allegation by Dr. Gopaul that we're shifting the goalposts. You invited us here to discuss corruption and the president's benefits. All I have said this evening is that we have to look at it in context. Our problem is with the 2009 bill. And we're saying that if you build a palace, don't expect the poor people of Guyana to maintain your staff. And a concern about this is that there are no caps. This is an open-ended act. Therefore, if you have stables, we are saying that this has no caps. That is our position. But I'm not shifting the goalposts.
Okay,
I'm
quite
happy to debate corruption with my friend right now.
Okay, we are entertaining.
So if he wants to discuss that, let's go ahead.
We are entertaining responses to that, and I think that the two things are tied: the idea of the president's pension and corruption, because the arguments that have been raised in opposition to the pension benefits were tied into corruption, so that the debate is about both. And I am still inviting responses to your statements, Mr. Hughes. And if Mr. Duncan has finished with his intervention, I still would like to give Mr. Ogle an opportunity. And I'm sure Mr. Nandalall had a few points that he is burning to respond to before we go to a break. Mr. Ogle.
Yeah, well, as we agree here, it's not the pension anymore. The pension is not an issue. It's house lot or land. I don't work at the Ministry of Housing. I'm from the Ministry of Labour, so I won't be able to assess or know anything about house lots and the rates and market value. I could discuss pension better. So that's my contribution, my response. I'm from the Ministry of Labour.
Well, if you may respond.
I understand.
When I respond, I came to deal with pension. Well, that's what I'm saying. I came to deal with pension.
All right.
But the question is not pension.
He's agreeing, sir, that the goalpost
has been shifted. All right.
It's land. It's not talking about land.
The goalpost has been
land
shifted.
And benefits.
All right. Well, let us go to a break now. When we return, we hope that we can readjust the goalpost where it started. All right. We'll go to a break and we'll hear from Stacey Carmichael about feedback.
Welcome again, viewers. We go right into our comments. We have the first comment from Sharon McDonald. She says, I find it deplorable that there are politicians on the side of the opposition that are willing to use the entitlement of a former president, in fact all former presidents, to score cheap political points and settle personal grouses. Not one of them will ever be able to match the contributions of the most recent former president in 4 lifetimes. We have a Facebook comment from Esley Loverboy De Jong. A very good night to all on the panel. Very good topic, but I need some answers. Will every president that comes after Jagdeo get the same benefits? And isn't pension received after the age of retirement? So that's a question for the panel. Baldio Matura says, I think former President Jagdeo's contribution to Guyana's development and its enhanced international stature owing to his advocacy on very pertinent issues makes him a standout in our history. No price can be attached to what he did for Guyana and Guyanese. All past presidents should be able to live comfortable lives after they demit office, and it is time our politicians put their grouses aside and understand that. And another comment from Esley Loverboy De Jong. A very good night to all on the panel. Very good topic, but I need some answers. Will every president that comes after Jagdeo get the same benefits? I guess that's the same comment. We go to Yolanda Elizabeth Charles. The former president's pension package, it seems, is being targeted by the joint opposition to score cheap political points. And that's all the comments we have in this break. Join us again for the third break.
Thank you very much, Stacey. And as we return, we closed the previous segment on comments made by members that Mr. Hughes has shifted the goalposts. Mr. Hughes, I'm sure, would like to...
Mr. Moderator, you invite me here to NCN series on corruption. I can't shift the goalposts. You shift the goalposts. You already know that this is NCN's program. This is as if Julius Iscariot held a television series on friendship and trust. Not for me to shift the goalposts. This is NCN's game.
Well, the point is that what I was...
So I can't shift NCN's game.
Well, the topic is president's pension. We're talking about house lots.
Was to allow you to re-establish the relevance.
But I thought I did that. I said everything is in context.
But Mr. Moderator, I merely want to make the point quite clear, lucidly clear, lest it be interpreted to mean that the President has taken, while he was in office, properties and assets of the state, and the mansion and all these things were not earned through his hard labor, and to point out that the President has complied with every aspect of the Integrity Act, like all his ministers, like all the PPP members of Parliament, and that I can't say happened with members of the opposition and those who ought, outside of the government, who ought to comply with the Integrity Act. I want to say that clear, and all of us can be and avail ourselves to any public scrutiny as to how we acquire our assets. It's not the same with the opposition. I want to make that point clear.
Can I
want to also...
Yes, I'm being left out of this entire debate.
Yes, you will...
This debate is between yourself, Mr. Hughes, and Mr. Gopal.
Mr. Nandalall, I will bring you in quite clearly.
We're running out of time, so we might have
I will just allow Mr. Hughes to respond to that last point, and then clearly we will bring you in.
Dr. Nanda Gopaul, I say this to you. You're a disciple of one of the finest leaders this country had, Chetty Jagan. Did Dr. Jagan acquire the sort of assets that President Jagdeo acquired while he was in office? Did Mrs. Jagan acquire it? Did Mr. Hoyt acquire it? Did Mr. Burnham, who you've spent a lot of your life fighting, acquire those sorts of assets when they were in office? And that is my question. Don't ask me about the opposition and about whether or not people file compliances or whether they disclose in the assets. It's a very simple question. No other head of state in this country, from independence to now, I can't say what the governors did, that was in colonial times, has acquired, while they are president, made a business of the presidency to acquire the assets that the state owned. Not assets they went out on the open market and bought, assets that the state owned that they then converted and bought below market prices. You identify to me whether Dr. Jagan or your worst enemy, Mr. Burnham, ever did comparable acts.
Okay, Mr. Nandalall.
Can I say, sir, President Jagdeo has received what every other Guyanese received under the government housing program. One, he got a house lot at what Mr. Hughes is describing as Pradoville. The place is called Good for Walking.
Pradoville 1.
Good for Walking. He got that along with hundreds of Guyanese who got house lots. He was not president at the time. He got that when he was finance minister. He built a house, Mr. Jagdeo. The difference between Mr. Jagdeo and every other president in this country is that he took power in his 30s. He didn't own anything. He came back from studies, he worked, and then he acquired as he was working. He was the only president that is distinguished in that respect. So he got a house lot as everyone else under the Ministry of Housing program. He paid, I think, $58,000 for that. Like every other Guyanese paid under the Ministry of Housing program. He built a house. He's the president of Guyana. He was earning at all times what the president's salary was, which is a tax-free salary of close to $1 million at all times during his presidency. That money, of course, he had other benefits from the state, so that money was there. He built a house. Like every other Guyanese, he built a house that he could have afforded. I visited the house. The house has fine facilities. He put the house up for sale and it was purchased. I visited the house. I don't know how Mr. Hughes can arrogate onto himself some type of expertise in the real estate market. I did the transaction. I negotiated as not only the attorney at law for Mr. Jagdeo, but also the duly constituted attorney. From the beginning to the end of that transaction, I negotiated. That was not the asking price, sir.
Mr. Ernie Ross, who is the PPP
that was not the Ernie. Sir, when that sale took place, it had nothing to do with Ernie Ross being campaign manager.
Ernie Ross,
that was long before the elections.
Will you allow
it was long before the elections. Ernie Ross is a campaign manager of many political parties in the Caribbean. And that must not be a factor if the PPP retain his services. He is regarded in the Caribbean as the best in that area. So that is another red herring that is being injected into this debate. So we went and we negotiated. That was not the agreed price. 600,000 was not the price that the president wanted. He wanted higher than that. We finally arrived at a price, and I conducted that entire transaction. Then another plot of land was made available for distribution of a certain quality of Guyanese office holders. Many ministers of the government, former commissioners of police, CARICOM secretariat officials, and other persons of a particular category were offered lands for sale. If Mr. Hughes doesn't fall into that category, that is not my problem. I don't fall into that category.
I just want to show my learned friend that I am a very
and therefore,
citizen. I don't have a
and therefore, sir, they were given criterion that were made public when these lands were allocated to the people who applied for it, and they were granted, including, as someone said, a former regional chairman. The target persons of this area were a particular category of office holders. And the president fell into that category. The impression that is being given here that the president embarked upon this conquest and acquired land by some improper way and improper procedure is one that must be wholly rejected. A procedure outlined by the procurement agency, which is the distribution agency, the Ministry of Housing, that policy was followed. That procedure was followed. The president, like every other citizen of this country, applied and benefited from that. And when you are president, it is not a disability. When you are president of this country, it must not be a disability. If other presidents didn't see it fit to acquire the properties, they had properties before. All the other presidents that Mr. Hughes spoke about. Mr. Desmond Hoyt had properties before. Dr. Jagan and Mrs. Jagan had property before. Mr. Burnham had property, and he took an entire estate at Bellbag and Belfield. But he still had properties before.
No,
so Mr. Jagdeo is in a different category.
Mr. Moderator,
okay.
Please, he was allowed the Attorney General to make those slanderous statements
but
against
look how many slanderous statements Mr. Hughes has made.
Mr. Burnham did not acquire Hope Estate.
Not Hope Estate, Bellbag Estate. Not Hope Estate.
Bellbag is owned by the Burnham family?
Sir,
please, Mr. Nandalall.
They acquired and occupied that property as if they were They owned it, and then they sold it to Mr. King Solomon. Those are the facts. So when Mr. Hughes speaks about conspiracy and acquire state land in this way, as though there is some dishonesty attached to it, I as Attorney General sitting must reject that, because that was not the reality out there. And what we are dealing with here, sir, is pensions. Have we gone off the pension?
Can I ask the Honourable Tony one question? Can you tell us how many other landholders who were afforded this, how many other privileged landowners who were afforded the opportunity to buy 2 acres of land in that neighborhood? If you can identify the other 2 acre lot holders.
Sir, I can't, because I don't know that they expressed an intention. If a person wanted 2 acres of land, then they would have purchased 2 acres of land. It doesn't mean that because Mr. Jagdeo purchased 2 acres of land, and I don't think that it is 2 acres, I'm not sure, but I'm saying that it doesn't mean that because Mr. Jagdeo purchased 2 acres, it means that it was only a facility extended to him. What kind of hypothesis is that? On what basis Mr. Hughes making that allegation? The fact that other persons in that vicinity does not own 2 acres allocation, is that the basis to arrive at the conclusion that that facility was exclusively extended to Mr. Jagdeo? That is a hypothesis without any empirical data to support it.
But what is wrong? What is wrong with a former president?
Nothing.
Or a president seeking to ensure that he lives a comfortable life after presidency, and especially knowing fully well, because we have term limit as president, knowing fully well that you are going to demit office, and you must ensure that you look for your future. We must not go from president to rags. No. Mr. Holness from Jamaica just became prime minister in 2 or 3 months, and he benefited from a pension.
But did you hear yourself just now?
No, I did say that he must not go to.
must ensure that he's okay. So
the
president must go into the office of the state.
It is not to the office of the state. He went not to the office of the state, the Ministry of Finance.
Why can't the president acquire a market on the open market like everybody else? Why does he have to, first of all, acquire state land, take part of the Dockers Club land, and up to now, neither yourself nor Mr. Nandalall has said to me where I can buy an acre of oceanfront property for $5 million.
So where do you expect the president to buy an acre of land? Where do you expect, if you can't get it?
To yourself clearly, the president, as the Honorable Attorney General just said, had already been allocated a lot in Prattville 1, 5,000 square feet of land and a 2-story building, which he sold for $600,000 US.
And I don't know if you are. What is wrong with that, Mr.
I'm not saying anything is wrong. Well, but you see, when you are in the office of president,
yes,
and you are the only person that could sell a 2-story concrete building on 5,000 square feet of land, residential property, for $600,000 US, there's some magic there. And so that you do not expose yourself to an allegation that you're not being improperly influenced, particularly where the purchaser is the campaign manager before that election and had been campaign manager for several elections before. Mr. Ernie Ross was my neighbor, I grew up next to him. You are therefore opening the office of the president, as it has been in this case, to an allegation that you got a special price, which means that you got that price as a result of the office, because Mr. Jagdeo had no other job. He wasn't moonlighting. His only job was as president. And if he can get above market prices for a 5,000 allow me to finish. And you don't see a problem with that, maybe you should check your optician.
Sir, I am saying that there is no basis for Mr. Hughes to say that the price that Mr. Jagdeo got for his first property was above market price. How can he has never entered. Has he ever visited the property?
No, but can I answer that?
I am aware.
When he's finished.
I am aware, sir. I have done, and I'm sure Mr. Hughes has done.
No, I know.
Transactions, conveyances as a practitioner of law, whereby you sell properties, residential properties, for $1 million US and over. I have done it in this country. And I'm sure Mr. Hughes has done it.
I want to make this point.
Yes, Mr. Hughes, and then we'll come back to you.
That the biggest person, organization that is involved in the sale of house lots, the Ministry of Housing. You don't have house lots available easily. You might have 1 and 2 being sold by private individuals. They develop schemes and they sell. And all the prices, including what the president pays, is consistent with state value. It's consistent with state value. Perhaps if you go in some other area, you may have higher prices. In the area where I live, I pay $5 million for a house lot.
Where's that?
I paid in Happy Acres, and I paid
$5 million now for a house lot in Happy Acres?
No, I'm saying
in 2009 you could get a house lot in Happy Acres.
In 2009 you could have gotten a house lot. I'm telling you, you could have. Seriously, in Happy Acres you could have gotten.
I'm sure the rest of the residents.
No, but this thing, look, this thing, Mr. Moderator, is we started. The focus was on the president's pension, even in Parliament. When you look at the resolution. I want to repeat, the resolution has nothing to do with the assets. If you want to discuss the president's assets, find out if the president, one, has submitted his returns to the Integrity Commission consistent with the law. Find out if his ministers and parliamentarians on his side, whether they have done so consistently, and find out whether the same is true for the opposition.
Right.
That will answer the issue of
we are going to
corruption.
a break. We are going into a break now. 30 seconds.
What I want to say, sir, is that what we are debating here is different from what the topic ought to be. The topic ought to be the president's pensions and the other benefits. And what the legislation of 2009, which has evoked the controversy, what it sought to do was to codify and statutarize benefits and facilities which were being enjoyed in an ad hoc way by former presidents. That is all that this legislation sought to do.
Okay, all right. Now we are going to go to a break. We'll get some more feedback from our wider audience. When we return, I'm going to invite each member of the panel to make closing remarks. We go to a break now. Stacey.
Welcome, viewers. As the debate continues, we have more comments coming in from our email and Facebook. Thomas Cole has a question. Guys, what are we really discussing tonight? I could have sworn it was about the president's benefits bill. We have a Facebook comment from Tyrone Talbot. I think the government's panelists should focus not on the laws, but the apparent corruption of acquiring state assets by Mr. Jagdeo. I have read the act and I support each former president and former first lady should receive a pension. However, I think the government needs to explain why state assets were transferred to former President Jagdeo. Facebook again, Gerard Ramsarup. The benefits of the opposition leader are all defined and capped. The president's is not. That difference amounts to millions. Narayan Kublal, good night to the team. The former President Jagdeo's pension debate is a total disgrace to a president who has put Guyana's name on the front burner. We should be grateful to President Jagdeo for his contribution to Guyana's economy and leave his benefits alone, so he can reap some reward for his hard work. The AFC has nothing good to debate on. Let us stop this bickering and unite for a great Guyana. Dave Martindale. This discussion gives members of the public an opportunity to view the true side of those who aspire to lead them. I find the actions of Nigel Hughes to be an embarrassment to the party he represents. Hughes has even resorted to insulting his host while directing vile and snide remarks at all and sundry. Why is Hughes being allowed to deflect from the theme of the discussion? It would appear that his sole intention of appearing on this program is to give a diplomatic style bust down. He must be mindful of his own indiscretions if he wants to cast aspersions on others. By the way, I pay my taxes. And that's all we have for you tonight on the comments. Remember to send your feedback at feedback@ncnguyana.com and on facebook.com/ncnguyana. Have a good evening, viewers.
Thank you very much, Stacey. All right, now as we return, and I invite the members to give their closing remarks. They may, of course, respond to some of the comments that we got from the wider audience. I am going to begin with Mr. Charles Ogle, who is the expert on tonight's panel, and he is the Chief Labour Officer. Mr. Ogle.
Yeah, a Facebook comment would have asked about age of pension. As I said, the public servants pension every age, or it's 55. When you're 55, you retire in the public service. there wasn't a national minimum age. There wasn't a national pension age. People worked until they drop or they can't turn up to work anymore. 60s, 70s, even in the 80s. So in 1999, the Pension Act was amended to bring into a national minimum pension age of 60. So you have persons when you reach out in the private sector, outside of the government agency, where there's a fixed pensionable or agreed pensionable age, it's now 60. But with the president, obviously the president would have operated at a high level, and you won't expect that person to continue to work unless he or she so desire. Hence you have the pension law for the former president. And in their life, they should continue, they should live comfortable without having the stress of knowing what would happen. And that is why the Constitution was amended to say, well, each person should have or be entitled, eligible to a pension.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Ogle. And next we will invite Mr. Carvil Duncan, Chairman of the Guyana Labour Union, to make his closing remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I came here tonight, I came with the intention to discuss the President pension. And quite early in the debate, I realized that we have shifted the goalposts, because the question of a pension, the President pension, is no longer on the debate. It is certain benefits that are on the debate. But one needs to realize a fundamental thing. When Mr. Jagdeo took office, he was quite a young man. And what he has done for Guyana, no other president up to now has done. He has made a significant contribution towards Guyana. And two, he has put Guyana back on the map. And next 10 to 12 years, we will continue to reap the benefits of the sacrifice that he had made for the benefit of Guyana. So I think in fairness to him, and in fairness to all other presidents to come, we ought not to be discussing his benefits, but merely to say, thank him for the contribution he has made, and let's move on.
All right, thank you very much. And we next ask the Honorable Nanda Gopaul, Minister of Labour, to make his closing remarks.
I want to say clearly, Mr. Moderator, that President Jagdeo has not been receiving benefits above what other presidents have been enjoying. President Jagdeo, other package include, I may repeat, every single item that was given to former presidents and even first ladies. Mrs. President Arthur Chung and Mrs. Chung benefited most under the pension package. They lived longer and they demitted office earlier. And the medical benefits that was paid to some of the persons who occupied the office can be considered to be even more favorable than what President Jagdeo is receiving. In fact, President Jagdeo doesn't have a full-time nurse at home, or two nurses for that matter, at home. President Jagdeo, other persons benefited from that. They benefited from electricity, they benefited from water, they benefited from telephone, all the utilities. And that is what President Jagdeo is getting. It's most unfair. The 7/8, as I said, I want to repeat, the 7/8 of the benefits, and I'm happy that the opposition has seen it fit to indicate clearly that they are not dealing with the 7/8, because it is now conceded that legislators are benefiting from that amount. There may be varying degree based on salaries paid to them as parliamentarians. And I want to say that the whole debate started with what they indicated, the opposition indicated, was an enormous sum of money being received by the president. And that has now shifted. And then we came up with the position of acquiring state lands, which to my mind is most unfortunate, because every other head of state I know of, ministers of the government, former ministers of the government, who acquired lands and properties, houses, mansions in Belleair Springs at far less price than what President Jagdeo bought an empty lot for. I know of former ministers of the government who acquired lots in the other areas on the East Bank, as I've indicated. But I'm saying that when you look at government land policy and the prices, whatever President Jagdeo may have benefited from is consistent with what every Guyanese may have had. It is true, perhaps, that in location, one may consider Sparendam a prime location. But when you look at the amount of work that had to be put into an area that has always been flooded, one will understand that having a piece of property in Sparendam is no luxury. It's no luxury.
All right, thank you very much. And now we would like to invite Mr. Nigel Hughes, Chairman of AFC, closing remarks.
I just wanted to respond to that in-house NCN comment about taxes. I paid $5 million in income tax last year. I challenged my learned friend.
Only?
And the GRA.
$5 million only?
I don't hear government work.
Which your kind of practice, Mr. Hughes?
Oh
my, I'm grateful for that disclosure.
I'm glad that you said
$5
that.
million in taxes a year. Mr. Nigel Hughes, sir, is one of the most prominent attorney in the Caribbean.
You have raised your point, sir. Let Mr. Hughes
but Mr. Nandalall has raised it.
Go on.
I don't get the government work. And
You
not
only
even
get
the
government
honorary work that is free and voluntary, I am now prevented from doing. So understand that. But having said that, I'm not familiar with many lawyers that have paid $5 million for last year in income tax or any year before it. Be that as it may. So the in-house comment that you had made, I just wanted to address that. But insofar as the closing comments are concerned, when you have to consider the president's benefits, it has to be looked at in context. In 2009, people were concerned, based on the experience of the previous heads of state, that they didn't want them to be left in circumstances of embarrassment. This act was passed when my learned friend's party had a majority, and immediately after it was passed, the president acquired 2 acres, built a palace, and is now using the act to have the poor state of Guyana pay for the palace staff. The AFC's position on this is very clear. This cannot be open-ended. It has to be capped. Every other country in the Caribbean has a cap. So all these benefits, for example, as in B, services of personal and household staff, including attendant and gardener, has to have a cap. And finally, insofar as Dr. Nanda Gopaul referred to previous ministers and previous members of the government, the AFC has not yet had the privilege of governing, so I cannot speak or address the question of what previous ministers or previous people who might have gotten house lots in Belleair Springs or wherever he's talking about. And the principle doesn't change.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hughes. And now the Honorable Anil Nandalall.
Sir, let me conclude by saying that this debate has established 2 things. One is that the president's pension apparently is not disputed anymore and ought not to be the subject of any controversy. The rate of pension at 7/8, as I said before, is what is enjoyed by parliamentarians and several high constitutional office holders in Guyana, so there is nothing irregular or unique about the rate of the pension. What obviously is a big humbug in the eyes of the AFC is the size of the president's house. It's being described consistently here as a palace. I don't know if Mr. Hughes went in, I went in. It's a big house that the president should live in. It's not as big as the State House. The president moved from the State House to a smaller house. But I don't know that the size of a president's house should be the concern of Mr. Hughes unless we can produce evidence to show that the president used taxpayers' money to build the house. The president, it's public information that the president sold one property which he acquired in ordinary circumstances, as every other Guyanese has done, and he sold that. The price was made public by me as his attorney at law and as his duly constituted attorney, and he purchased another house. He acquired the land for that house through a process which is now public. Other Guyanese who live in close proximity to that area went through that same process and acquired that land. The president decided the size of house that he's going to build, and he has built it. Some people are describing it as palaces, as a palace. I have seen it, and it's not anything close to that. I heard an allegation that some club, Dorcas Club property, was acquired wrongfully. If that is so, I reject that notion completely. Absolutely, on this program. Mr. Hughes is a competent enough lawyer to have already filed an action if that was so, and to make that a big political issue. So that is not a fact, and I reject that. Then the other point that I want to make is that the Benefits and Other Facilities Act, which seemed to have excited some amount of controversy from the other side, as I have said from the beginning, even during the elections campaign, is something that was blown out of proportion, misrepresented, and has been the subject of political propaganda. All that legislation sought to do was to statutarize, was to codify what the benefits that other presidents were enjoying at the time, past presidents. What this bill sought to do was to put it into law, to bring it into a regulatory framework so that in the future we will be clear as a country and as a nation what our president is entitled. We did that also for the leader of the opposition. And the two pieces of legislation are of striking similarity, almost identical benefits which are enjoyed by the leader of the opposition. And significantly, we have not heard a single utterance of criticism emanating from the opposition about this, although it is a bill or an act that is in pari materia with the President Pension and Other Facilities Act. The identical free electricity, free medical, duty-free concessions, clerical and other staff, domestic staff are all the facilities which the leader of the opposition enjoy, and those are the benefits which the president enjoys, and those are the very benefits that every one of his predecessor had enjoyed. And this bill is not something that's bad, it's something that's good. It was intended to bring regularity to bring regulation to an unregulated issue.
Thank you very much. And as we
the opposition leader's chair is empty. Maybe he can get a response from the chair.
That's okay. As we come to the end of this debate, the structure of the debate is that we have members of the panel here debating the issue, and we also allow inputs from members of the public, of the wider audience. These members of the wider audience are able to make their comments and pose their questions through a facility which we call feedback. And the comments and the questions that we hear there are channeled to us from the members of the public. We would like to thank our panel, the Honorable Anil Nandalall, Attorney General, Mr. Charles Ogle, our specialist on the panel, Chief Labour Officer, Mr. Nigel Hughes, the chairman of the AFC, Mr. Carvil Duncan, the president of the Guyana Labour Union, and Dr. Nanda Gopaul, Honourable Minister of Labour. I am Al Crichton. I would like to extend our thanks to NCN for their production of this program and invite you to join us again when we return to the debate series on corruption. Good night.